Welcome back. Let's go to line number 3. Robert, you're on the air.
Good morning, Patty. How are you today?
Doing okay, thanks. How about you?
I'm okay. It's a beautiful day here in Exploits. The sun is shining for a change, so hopefully everything starts drying up, but it's frozen today. I just want to talk about wind energy a little bit. So I just remember that Minister Parsons mentioned that there were off-ramps that the government has in place in order to exit these deals if things aren't looking good. I'm just wondering, are you aware of any of the things that would trigger them using one of those off-ramps?
Just say that again for me, Robert, sorry?
Minister Parsons mentioned that there are off-ramps in place that the government has that they can take to exit these agreements that they have with the wind energy developers. I'm just wondering what it would take. I'm wondering what it would take for them to use one of those off-ramps.
I don't know. Good question, though.
No idea, hey? Oh, yeah. Thank you. Another question I have about the financing of it all. The water royalties, they say that they don't have to start paying those until 100% of their capital costs are recouped, correct?
That's right.
So my question is, say example, for a $10 billion capital project, would it take a $10 billion sales to recoup their total costs, or are they factoring in that there's going to be a total of 60% investment tax credits from a combination of 40 from federal and 20 from provincial? So would they have to recoup $4 billion, or is it a total of $10 billion before we see those royalties paid off?
Well, the way that it's written is that it's a total capital cost recovery. So I assume in the world of cost recovery, anything that's in the form of a subsidy or a credit or a break or cash on the barrelhead is taken out of capital recovery, because if you recover 40% via tax, then we can't double that. I mean,
that's what I'm asking.
Well, that's the way I understand it.
Yes, so we have a 40% federal investment tax credit, and as well, the province announced that they have an additional 20% provincial investment tax credits that they're going to be applying to these green hydrogen projects as well. So, like I said, for the $10 billion, just using a round number, investment total for one of these developments. So my question is, do they have to pay? They're only paying 40% basically at the end of the day. And as well, are those investment tax credits, do they get them once they deliver a single shipment of ammonia, or is it staged over the whole life of the project?
It's just about use. So it's the use fee is crystal clear. Supposing that ammonia and hydrogen makes it nowhere, the fact of the matter is if they use the water, there's a fee. That's it.
That's for the royalties, yes, but for the investment tax credit. So if you're going to spend $10 billion on a project and there's $6 billion available in tax credits, is that applicable as soon as you make your first delivery of ammonia, you get that full $6 billion tax credit?
No.
Or is it staged over the life of the project over the 34 years that they have planned?
Yeah, no, it couldn't possibly be an upfront full-on subsidy, because it's all about operationals and thresholds, which have not been defined yet. Same thing when we talk about like the Fed's involvement in electric vehicle battery facilities. The subsidies come based on production, based on thresholds that have to be hit. There's no way for this to not be the exact same case, because what happens if they get their $6 billion and they simply shut it down and leave town? So that makes no sense at all. It would have to be based on production.
Well, that's the question we're asking, and we can't seem to get correct answers or firm answers. So we're not getting the answers to these questions that we're asking, is my point. We're asking questions, and we're just getting the runaround saying, oh, this is a great opportunity, there's a lot of potential profit. But if you look into it, like I asked the proponent here in Exploits himself, I said, what's the expected cost of production versus your sale cost? And his response was, well, it doesn't matter what it takes to cost to make, we're still going to be profitable. So in my view, I'm not a businessman by no means, but in my view, in order to have a successful business, you need to have a product, you need to know what your cost to make your product, and you need to have a market to sell your product and know what that price would be in order to anticipate any profits. And right now, we don't have any of those answers. So I'm still confused as to why people are still so supportive of this, when the questions that we're asking, we're not getting the answers still. It's a year later, more than a year in some cases.
It'll be easy enough for me to get answers to the provincial off-ramp stuff. The rest of it's all pretty much a federal question, which becomes a little bit more difficult to get answers to for a variety of silly reasons. But I will right away get an answer to what would trigger or what would be specifics of an off-ramp that the government could avail of, the provincial government. And I don't know the answer, but I'll get it.
Well, I would think that if they're not meeting the criteria set out for them by the provincial roadmap, so like not meeting their targets for community engagement, lack of Indigenous consultation, misleading or not representing their public engagements accurately, all of which ever coherent exploits have done and we have evidence of. So, as well as other cases such as they don't have, sorry, what was I going to say? They don't have customers and they don't have a market, and every news story that's being presented in the public right now, it basically says what a terrible idea this project is and they're destined to fail, even from design, from an energy transfer point. So I'm still really upset that we're not getting answers from our leaders, and they don't seem to be concerned that these projects are pretty much destined to fail. And as Minister Parsons said, the worst case scenario for him is that, well, if they put in the projects and they don't work, then they just have to take them back down again. But, I mean, there's irreversible damage that will be done to our ecosystems and environments from the construction, as well as one of the outlines or guidelines from the World Energy Project conditions said that they have to inform the government if they plan to sell the project. So the government doesn't even have any say over who they sell it to. So if these projects get sold to a foreign nation or somebody we don't have good diplomatic relationships with, what's that look like for the future of our province in these areas?
Yeah, I'm not so sure about the foreign ownership issue, but most of the things that you mentioned, back out the off-ramp conversation, is 100% business model stuff. And I guarantee you, if any of these proponents walk into a Goldman Sachs office in Manhattan without answers to those questions, they don't get any money. That's going to be the trick here. Whether or not it's good for the environment, I think we've had very comprehensive conversations about it. But energy loss, price point for the end user, global forecast for the value of the hydrogen market by mid-century, I'm telling you right now, it's going to be extremely difficult to finance these things because the business model, and this is not coming from people who are simply leaning in on environmental issues, for folks who are looked at it insofar as end price points and all the logistics for transportation, what have you, and energy loss and all the rest that you rightfully point out, that is straight up lender questions. And if they're not getting the answers, one thing for me and you'd not be able to get the answers, but if they don't get them, then they're not going to loan anybody billions of dollars to come up with a business model that looks fatally flawed from the outset. So that's why we haven't seen any action here, I would think. Two things. The government of Canada has not defined green, what it is, because there's a long way between 15% tax subsidy and 40. And the whole whether or not it can work with the price point for the end customer, that's lender stuff. And they talk about having made final investment decision based on some of those factors. Plus, World Energy in particular has said out loud, unless they can secure minimum 10-year power purchase agreements, they will not be proceeding. So I think there's a lot of the financial questions still looming and unanswered in full.
Absolutely, no, and like I think I mentioned before, I don't believe that many of these large-scale projects will ever see the light of day. And a great example of that is Mr. Risley over on the West Coast pivoting to the AI data center. Like, it seems to me like he's just focused on getting the tax credits for building the wind turbines at whatever cost he can and whatever justification he can use. So I know there was a great article that was in, I believe it was The Independent, that I Smell Cucumbers, that covered it pretty well. And at the end of it, the reporter or the writer said that she doesn't believe that they intend to build turbines, but I just want to say I think building turbines is their main goal. It's the construction that they'll make the money on, like I've stated before. And if they fail, then they'll be paid again to remove them all. So the people, you got to look into the people who are in line to make a lot of money on this, and who's behind them, and who's sitting on the board of directors, and where else they are willing to set up the profit with all these developments. So again, with the proposal for, or the talks about the new gas turbine in Holyrood for 150 megawatts, that it was at $1.5 billion. So if we have a new gas turbine in order to supply power for these grids, how does that affect the carbon rating for these green energy projects if it's using a fuel that creates carbon?
Well, it'll all be based on the percentage of renewables on the grid, just like the same thing in Nova Scotia, which is why those proposals will see a lower tax subsidy than the ones here, if it ever happens, because they'll just use a percentage of, the energy created for the grid, period, as opposed to 150 megawatt generator at Holyrood being responsible for powering up World Energy GH2 or the Exploits Valley proposal or down the Burin Peninsula. So that'll be a percentage number. I do have to run, Robert, but I will try to get some answers to some of those questions as best I can.
Excellent, thank you, Patty, and I hope you have a great day. But like I said, I hope these things go away quick as possible, because there doesn't seem to be any market case, and every expert that's being, every article I've read recently is saying what a terrible idea it is. So,
well, economists are saying it. I'll make a very quick comment on the independent opinion piece. It was Angela Antle wrote it. I get where she's coming from, but the relationship to Sprong, and then people making the direct connection to Muskrat. But her article, in summary, was talking about his yet to be vocalized plan here is to be involved in the Atlantic Loop. I kind of get that, but there is no such thing. So, the government of Canada has walked away from it. New Brunswick and Nova Scotia have walked away from it. So building it to be part of the Atlantic Loop when there is no such thing and nobody is involved anymore. The feds have walked away with the money. Nova Scotia is out. New Brunswick is out. So the Atlantic Loop is simply and remains be a liberal branding exercise as opposed to a real transmission project. So I get where she was coming from, but accessing something that's not actually a thing kind of left me wondering, maybe I'm missing something. And I could be, but, anyway. I do have to go, Robert.
And the whole... I just want to say the whole idea of the Atlantic Loop can be completely negated if there were more nuclear power plants and SMRs implemented on the East Coast and where they need the power. So it's the long-term best supply for
that's an American
low-carbon energy.
Yeah, that's an American
exactly,
issue.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And this is what we're dealing with over here. The Germany's issue is getting off nuclear, and now they spent hundreds of billions of dollars wasted on wind energy over there. So
thanks for the call.
I hope you read that article I sent you. Yep.
Have a great day. Thanks, you too. All right.